2 years in jail. 7 police officers in Hong Kong have been convicted for beating an Occupy Central Movement supporter, and the former chief executive of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region, Donald Tsang Yam Kuen, is accused of misconduct and will be sentenced on Wednesday. What role is the system of law playing in Hong Kong? Divided opinions have been heard since the 7 police officers were convicted. Is the verdict justified? What impact will it have on Hong Kong society? When protests get violent, police officers throughout the world handle these situations differently. How are these incidents influencing the public image of police officers? 20 years have passed since Hong Kong's handover from the UK to the mainland. How is Hong Kong's decolonization process proceeding?
On February the 14th, 7 police officers in Hong Kong were sentenced to 2 years imprisonment for assaulting a protester during the Occupy Central movement in 2014. The verdict immediately became a hot topic not only in Hong Kong, but also on the mainland, with some observers alleging that the verdict was political and not a simple judicial case. To know more about the influence of the verdict and discuss issues related to the relations between mainland and Hong Kong, today I'm happy to be joined in the Beijing studio by Tao Jingzhou, managing partner of the Curd LLP China practice.
Legal remedy is available for those 7 policemen. They can lodge an appeal with the Court of Appeal. They can even get a grace from Chief Executive of Hong Kong SAR.
Joining us in the panel discussion is Edward Lehman as well. He's the managing director of Lehman, Lee and Xu.
As a lawyer, I believe in judicial independence, but shame on you, Judge Dufton, on the outcome of for the 7, putting the 7 policemen's careers at an end and sentencing them to jail and thumbing your nose up at the political system. It's not a good thing.
We shall also speak to Ting Wong Kasi. He is Executive Counselor of China-Australia Legal Exchange Foundation in Hong Kong via satellite. But that's our topic. This is Dialogue. I'm Yang Ray. Gentlemen, what do you think of the verdict? Jack?
It's certainly not a very lenient verdict, and I think the judge found that they committed a crime. They have to be punished as a law enforcement body. They have intentionally hurt the people, or they have to be served a prison sentence.
Do you think this is an ideologically motivated one because of the legacy of the British colonialism?
Well, I mean, it's ironic that, of course, a British judge, Judge Dufton, has given the opinion. I mean, this is a hotbed. You've got 8 million or 7 million people that live in Hong Kong. You've had this unrest that occurred, and it was an extremely difficult situation. But to judge these 7 police officers to prison for 2 years seems to be extraordinarily high when you have 955 arrests, and this was the only incident that they could come up with. So I think it's a political situation, and one that should be rethought, and probably will be rethought at the Court of Appeals, certainly.
Let's solicit immediate response from a commentator based in Hong Kong. He's standing by in Hong Kong. Let's have his comments on question number 1. Hello, Ting Wong Kasi, he's with us. Question number 1 is 7 police officers in Hong Kong have been convicted of beating a protester during the Occupy Central movement in 2014, and each of them has been jailed for 2 years. What do you think about the verdict? Is it appropriate, as the District Court Judge David Dufton said in his sentencing remarks?
I think that this 2-year sentence was received with a mixed feeling. Some say it is long, some say it is short. I think the judge is just like a referee in a football match. He managed the trial, he convicted the defendants and for 2 years, and he can say everything which is relevant and legal in his own judgment, and inclusive of the sentencing remarks.
But I'm afraid the law enforcement troops in Hong Kong are at a historical low in terms of their morale. Jiu Chan, chairman of the Junior Police Officers Association, stated that he was shocked by the jail term and vowed that his union, representing more than 20,000 officers, would help the convicted officers appeal the verdict. What are the chances that the appellate court will overturn the verdict?
I think the chance is 50-50. Hong Kong legal system is an adversarial system. On one hand, the police officers can launch an appeal against both conviction and sentence, and they can talk to the Court of Appeal that the trial judge did everything wrong. On the other hand, we have Department of Justice. The prosecutor will say, no, 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 the verdicts are correct. So, but all the lawyers in this case will back up with their submissions with legal authorities. The Court of Appeal will hear the case very soon. So I think let us just be patient. Also, the Hong Kong majority may say this sentence is very bad, but judges are human beings. There is a chance that they might hear the voice, and there is a chance they will take this social opinion into consideration. But I must confess, I don't have any legal authority to back up my my personal view. Yes.
But Mr. Tao, common sense says that the law enforcement personnel should be held to a higher standard of morality and their code of ethics. In this case, what do you think of the complaint by Jiu Chan, who represents over 20,000 police officers in Hong Kong, and he would go to the Court of Appeal to hopefully overturn the verdict? What would be the chance, and what do you think of their complaints?
As their colleague in the police body, of course, he must say something of that nature. However, we should not forget that a court of final appeal 10 years ago rendered a verdict, basically said that the sanction against the policeman must be deterrent sentence, meaning should be dissuasive enough so that in the future, police are not going to commit such a kind of a crime. So in this case, the judge said, we have to follow this precedent because we are a common law country. Second, you have dishonored the police as a whole in Hong Kong. Third, you have really destroyed the reputation of Hong Kong. So for all this reason, they think that a 2-year sentence is a reasonable one. Of course, Court of Appeal can always turn down such a kind of verdict to say that maybe it's 6 months or 1 year or whatever sentence that the Court of Appeal feel appropriate.
Do you think the sentence of the 7 police officers may have discredited the reputation of the judges instead? Do you believe they have exercised discretionary power?
Sure. I mean, they do have discretionary power. There's no question about that. And to disagree with our friend in Hong Kong who said that they have the power to say what they want to say, we call that in common law dicta. And dicta is extemporaneous stuff that is not necessary to finding one way or the other on the case. And to a certain extent, Judge Dufton has basically fueled the fire with his comments. He can keep the comments, make a judgment, keep the comments to a low roar, and not make such a controversy about it and come out with it. But 2 years or 2 days or whatever it is condemning those 7 people who have dedicated their lives to becoming law enforcement officials to having a stain on their reputation for their entire lives now. And so this is a very, very heavy-handed outcome, I think, in the situation, given the facts. It's an extraordinary situation, but the situation was extraordinarily handled well by the police department as a whole.
What do you think of the national identity of most of the judges who granted the verdict? I mean, this issue itself drew a lot of fire from mainland observers who said, look, they are the product of the British colonialism, and therefore there's a lot more to be done to decolonize the legacy of the British territory before 1997. Do you think this is a big issue which is looming larger?
I don't think it's a big issue up to now, because based on the basic law, that's the way that the judge was selected. And this was nominated by chief executive. If a chief executive think that maybe foreigners should not be judged, or British or other country should not be judged in Hong Kong, they wouldn't have nominated them. So nominate the judge is based on their knowledge, impartiality, the judgment call. So in that sense, whether there are a lot of British judge or not, is not an issue based on basic law.
What do you think of the decision by the SER government back in 1997 to appoint overseas judges? Was it done in the hope of maintaining stability during the transition period? If that was to hold any water, do you think those who are accused may have lost their case?
Right. I mean, the decision, again, this long shadow of having foreign judges down there, I understand the thought process behind it, but as someone who is interacting with that jurisdiction quite a lot and have interacted with that jurisdiction, the judiciary, with regards to the non-Chinese or non-Hong Kong judges, has become a race to the bottom. It's the absolute, you want to talk about draining the swamp. I mean, that is become really a refuge for really not positive thought processes, because who's policing them? Who's looking after those people? I think that it should be mostly Hong Kongers, it should be mostly Chinese, and it shouldn't be foreigners any longer, because you've got 5,000 solicitors there, you've got 500 barristers, about 50 barristers are being used, and most of those are white people. And
yeah,
so that's
I cannot agree with Edward, because under this judgment-related regulations, after you acted as a judge, you can no longer act as a barrister or lawyers. Therefore, their whole career will be jeopardized. Some good lawyers, they do not want to be judge, because in the future you can no longer make a bigger income.
But the same could be said about the police officers. They may have take into consideration the high risk of the occupation, because they could be easily fired and humiliated. In this case, for example, even British Judge David Dufton argued that the 7 police officers must have acted under immense stress. So there should be some kind of justification for the violence of the officers, but there's no excuse, in his words, for taking this protester to the substation and to assault him. What do you think of the stressful situation that may have prompted the police officers to beat the protester?
There, by the grace of God, go most of us, honestly. With regards to the police officers, they're not paid a great deal of money. They're doing this, I would imagine, out of the passion of keeping law and order in the special administrative region that's Hong Kong. And so, I mean, there must have been some extenuating circumstances that really were making them target this one particular individual. And I think that you should look and weigh the whole matter of the career of the officers in relation to this, and also the situation that was at hand in a larger scale, not just that one particular moment. So it's a weighing factor for sure.
Okay, thank you very much. I know Jack has a lot more to say, but you are watching Dialogue. We're discussing whether the legal penalty by British Judge David Dufton is a bit too heavy for the law enforcement troops in Hong Kong for beating a protester. This verdict has caused a lot of debate here in the mainland. When we come back, we'll look at more of such issues that has caused an uproar on both sides, Hong Kong and the mainland. Stay with us.
CGTN shows you more, providing a fresh global voice you can trust.
And
and a different look at the world you won't find anywhere else.
We offer unparalleled coverage of Asia, Africa, and Latin America.
We present diverse perspectives on news and newsmakers from around the world.
We want to engage our viewers with stories that represent the complete picture.
We want to share with you ideas that matter to us all.
The stories, the people, the issues.
A new and balanced perspective.
CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back. So, Mr. Tao Jingzhou, is there any justification for the 7 police officers to beat the protester? Because in the United States, for example, cops would easily lose their temper. They would easily blow the brains out, shoot a protester, humiliate them with urine or other things like stone.
I think you have to be case specific. In this case, the beat is not taking place on the spot when the guy pulled the liquid on the policeman.
Wait a minute, what kind of liquid was that?
It's a yellow, people say maybe urine or something. Anyway, so those 6 guys took the Mr. Chang with a handcrafted and many meters away, then dumped them on the floor. So if you have immense, stress, everything, while walking 50 meters away, you should have lost your stress somehow. But this is intentionally try to beat somebody, to punish him with this private justice, which is not allowed by the law. So when you talk about the U.S. policeman's brutality, it's normally on the spot, meaning what fighting. If this guy, we hold him on the spot, pulling something, police beat him, I don't think there are any prison sentence.
Well, you also have a similar case in Guantanamo, where the abuse and torture of POWs have captured headlines, and that caused President Obama to threaten to close Guantanamo. But of course, it's not closed yet. Well, what do you think of the human anger of police officers?
Well, it's reasonable, it's understandable, given the stress and the situation that they're under. Agreed. I mean, they took these persons away and they were at a substation.
But that's a violation of law,
sure.
Is it?
And that's what Judge Duffin...
And therefore, the penalty should be very heavy.
Right. At the same time, I mean, I am not convinced that the Hong Kong police have been trained and educated in how to maintain these kind of things. I think that this is an anomaly. In all the years that I've been around, they certainly have not ever encountered something like this. And so you can expect strange reaction to a very strange situation. And although that was not right, this may be a bit heavy-handed with all things considered. And might I add also, the one thing that we don't have in mainland China, but they should have in Hong Kong, is some sort of plea bargaining situation where they're talking about this with the judge ahead of time and coming up with a more amicable solution that might be more palatable for everybody, as opposed to trying the case and then going all the way through it. So oftentimes in the United States, if something like this happens, a police officer would be represented by a lawyer. The lawyer would talk to the district attorney. They would come up with a lower charge, and then they would dismiss it. It wouldn't be a public thing so much. So I think that the mistake here is that it has been so darn public, and then there's polarity with regards to how this was treated as a result. We're talking about it today.
2 years of imprisonment aside for the moment, what do you think of 5 weeks imprisonment for this protester? And in sharp contrast against the 2 years imprisonment, which is widely regarded by mainlanders as well as the Police Officer Association in Hong Kong as a little bit too heavy. What do you think of this note of irony?
I think the judge certainly distinguished 2 situations. One is for ordinary people, where their threshold is kind of low, while for the police officer, they have to apply a much strict requirement. So is that enough? 5 weeks? Is that better to have 5 months? It's it's really a discretionary power of the judge.
Let me go back to the issue of de-Sinification or decolonization. Currently, much of Hong Kong's legal system is controlled by British judges or people cultivated by the then British Hong Kong government. So, what role do foreign judges play in the judiciary of Hong Kong, and should the judges at every level of Hong Kong's courts be Hong Kong's one day? Now, the handover took place in 1997. These days, people see less and less Chinese influence, hence the growing influence of a pro-secession movement. And Occupy Central movement is part of this tendency by younger generation, especially. Hence, we saw the humiliation over and over by protesters like this man Chang, who was only sentenced to 5 weeks. So what do you think of the general atmosphere of de-Sinification? And do you think less intervention from the mainland, respecting the one country, two systems, basic law, for example, would only lead to more unacceptable consequences for the mainland?
No, I think what has to happen in Hong Kong is, I mean, in dealing with having dealt with the Law Society there over the years and being in contact with them, I mean, that's more Dickinsonian than Dickens itself. I mean, the system is old, and it should be more open. There should be more mainland lawyers that are sitting for the examination. There should be more mainland lawyers that are admitted. There should be people from a lot of different jurisdictions that should be admitted there. And I think that would allow there to be some sort of a balance. But I think that the system is not quite welcoming. Like I said, it's a city of 7 or 8 million people. They've got 5,000 solicitors. They've got 500 barristers. It's really very, very small. In Chicago, where I come from, there's about 78,000 lawyers in the state of Illinois. And so I think that part of the problem is that the feeding system on who would become a judge, and maybe you would have to take a look at what Mr. Tao talked about, which is if someone becomes a judge, can they go back into private practice? And so you might be able to get those people who are, super excellers and winners and want to have things go in a positive way. So I don't think it necessarily has to be the mainland has to come down on Hong Kong, although there needs to be a heavier hand, no doubt about it. But I think that there should be more in the process.
Yeah, also because all the, judgment must be written in English. So you got to have a native speaker to write this. By sending some Chinese to be a judge in Hong Kong is not really, a good
You may
option.
have underestimated the huge influence of British education for 150 years.
Also,
so the level of English proficiency may have been underestimated by you.
Right. Also,
native speakers may not be the only choice.
Also in 2047, one is 50 years, one country, two system, and I don't think they will have any British judge left. So you will have certainly maybe the court procedure will be in Chinese only. So anyway, we still have another 30 years to go.
We may have less whites, but we have more Hong Kong citizens who have the British passports. Do you think this is also a matter of British colonialism?
Yeah, I mean, well, to a certain extent, I mean, it's not necessarily a bad thing as a foreigner. It's not necessarily a bad thing to have people in different dynasties throughout China.
I'm asking a question as to the relationship between basic law and the PRC constitution.
Right.
Do you think National People's Congress, which is the supreme legislature in the mainland, would have the right to submit their independent and very Chinese interpretations about whatever execution of the basic law in Hong Kong?
It's the permanent committee, standing committee of National People's Congress has the right to interpret the basic law. So you have some degree of interference with the Hong Kong affairs through such a kind of methodology.
Right. Let me go back to our commentator in Hong Kong. So do you think Judge Dufton has exercised his discretionary power properly in this case because of his because of the disputes on his national identity? And this is not a case in isolation. I mean, it may have fueled strong suspicions by not only the police officer association in Hong Kong, but more in the mainland who are so critical of the verdict.
Yes, I think this question is exactly a question for the Court of Appeal. Our police officers would say that the trial judge had exercised his discretion improperly, that the trial judge gave less weight to the surrounding circumstances, that the trial judge gave less weight on the mitigations. But having said all that, I think in Hong Kong, the sentencing itself, the exercise of sentencing, is the discretionary territory for the judge to maneuver, and the judge himself alone is in full charge of the case. And when you talk about the foreign judge involvement in Hong Kong, I think when you discuss the law, pure law, a trial happened in Hong Kong, we just look at the professionalism of the judge. We just look at what the law says, and the judge will only look at the bare wordings of the legislation and apply the law to the facts. And in my opinion, as a barrister, the color of the skin is never an issue in Hong Kong court, and that is a strong belief that I hold at the moment. I think I will hold this strong belief for years to come. But the element of foreigners here do stir up quite a lot of social controversy, and I really take note of this controversy, and I think government also will do something about it.
Skin color may not be the issue, but in the case of O.J. Simpson, the skin color was indeed a big issue. For example, the jury who was involved in the trial of O.J. Simpson were mostly African Americans. Do you think this is a politically correct one, or the other way around?
You know, again, it's the trier fact in that case were the jury, and the jury came up and said that there was not a crime that was committed, and he was innocent. So I mean, you know, and Judge Dufton has heard the facts. I mean, Mr. Tao here put them forth, but he heard them more in detail than we did. Certainly, I still believe that, you know, a strong signal needs to be sent to support the police in this particular instance, and a strong signal needs to be said from Beijing that they are clearly in charge, because I think that sometimes it gets a bit lost down there in Hong Kong. And as someone who is hopeful always with Hong Kong, I've never been overwhelmed. I've been underwhelmed with the outcomes of some of the decisions that have happened down there.
Very quickly, your comments on what's going to happen after people in Hong Kong and mainland commemorate the 20th anniversary of the handover, because this year witnessed the 20th anniversary of the return. Now, governing Hong Kong by Hong Kong people turned out to be a serious problem if you take this ruling as a wake-up call. I mean, there's indeed the big issue of whether we trust each other, right? Particularly, we're going to have a growing discontent, growing dissatisfaction from the police officers. Do you think stability will be effectively protected when morale of the law enforcement personnel has dropped to such a historic low?
I don't think that the police officer in Hong Kong has their morale completely low, because you always have bad potatoes. So this 7 policemen beat people is not an honorable action. So if you get rid of bad potatoes, although maybe the sentence is too strong,
Thank you very much.
It will be better.
Thank you very much. Obviously, this is a big issue. I hope to bring you guys back for a serious discussion about the impact of this trial when we commemorate the 20th anniversary by July the 1st this year. Until then, goodbye.